What's going on, folks? This is Eddie Carson here. You're listening to Race Matters here at WJOP LP Newburyport, Joppa Radio 96.3. And like we do all the time, we're here to talk about race matters and why race does matter. So I'm excited here because I got a homeboy here in the studio tonight. And we're going to ask him to kind of jump in here for a little bit. We got Ritch Winokur.
Don't.
I'm having fun with the name and everything. Ritch Winokur.
Thank you.
Jumping in and everything. What's going on, brother?
Not much, man. How you doing?
I'm all right. You know, we're going to have a little fun tonight. We have a couple things we're going to talk about. But before we get here, you know, just got to ask for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself. Particularly, tell us a little bit about your identity.
All right. My name is Ritch Winokur. I live here in Newburyport. Have for the last 8 years. Was in Amesbury for a while before that. I think 18 years or 12 years. I am a white man, born Jewish. I'm not a practicing Jew.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Religion's not really my thing.
Oh.
But definitely, you know, identify culturally as a Jew still. I guess, I don't know, what else you want to know?
Man, you know, that'll work. Just a lot of stuff here and everything. Speaking of, did you hear, what is her name? She's on some show called, I think it's called The View. Whoopi Goldberg.
I've heard of her.
You heard of her?
Yeah.
I had to even conjure up her name for a second and everything. So she's been suspended by ABC for 2 weeks because she said that the Holocaust was not about race. And I'm paraphrasing here. She stated that the Holocaust had to do with other stuff but without race, henceforth denying the fact that Jewish folks are a part of a race. She's been suspended for that comment and a lot of ignorance there. So when you hear that, what do you think?
You know, the Holocaust is such a...
It's a touchy subject.
Such a touchy subject. But, I mean, I guess growing up, you know, Jewish, we always, you know, it's interesting because being Jewish is at once a religion and kind of like a race. Or, you know, I used to have people say to me, you know, they would look at me and they'd say, you're either Jewish or Italian. And I'd say, well, one is a religion and one is a nationality. But, you know, I guess, you know, it is considered a race, I think. And, you know, part of me is like, you know, people on TV, they're sitting there for hours and needing to talk about something. And you know, I'm guessing a lot of people say things off the cuff that they don't necessarily mean. But listen, I mean, the society that we live in today, it's very, you know, very keyed up on that kind of stuff. And you got to be sensitive. And I think, you know, for me, I like the idea of not just being called out, but being called in, you know. And I think I only read this very quickly earlier today, what we're talking about here. And it sounds like, you know, Whoopi is saying that, well, okay, you know, I get it. Thanks for calling me out. And but, you know, I don't know, you just got to be careful what you say these days.
She's been suspended.
You know, I don't know enough about it, Eddie. So again, tell me again what she said.
She said that the Holocaust had nothing to do with race. And again, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the exact thing. You know, I would pull it up on my phone, but that'd take me 10 centuries to do that. Yeah. She stated, you know, essentially that it was about other stuff, but race wasn't a part of it. And again, this goes back to denying Jews as a race.
Yeah, I definitely think that, you know, in my reading and my, learning of the history of the Holocaust, you know, certainly I think the Germans and the Nazis in particular thought that the Jews were a race. And
they wanted to create the master race.
That's right. That's right. And they wanted to exterminate that race. So I guess, you know, it doesn't sound right to me to say that, you know, it wasn't about race. Whether or not she should have been suspended. I don't know. I'm not gonna, I don't know the inner workings of network television. But
well, and trust me, you're not far behind me. But when I hear this stuff too, I think about all the things that are happening. We think about whiteness, white identity. We think about Jewish identity, anti-Semitism, racism, all of those things that are kind of coddled into one thing. For example, Joe Rogan. Have you been following that story with Spotify?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. What do you know about that?
I know that, it's funny, I was talking to my brother about this the other day. It's complicated for me in a way. It's not complicated that and again, I've not ever listened to the Joe Rogan show.
Oh, no, I don't.
I only know him from 100 years ago when he was the host of Fear Factor, and that.
See, I didn't even know that. I mean, he can walk into the space right now.
Yeah.
I would have no idea, who he is.
I would know who he is, but I haven't listened to his show, and I get it. There's people out there that are trying to do provocative things and be outrageous on air and stuff like that, and I get it. Certainly if he's spreading misinformation
yes.
about COVID, that's not cool. But for me, and this is what I was talking about with my brother, I said, protecting free speech is, not really always the speech that you like, but it's the speech that you hate. And so I get that, right? And because, but also Spotify is not a government agency, right?
Right.
So they don't have to put out there whatever they decide they don't want to put out there, right? So and so then you have people putting pressure on Spotify to say, hey, what he's doing is not cool, and you need to stop it. So, definitely love Neil Young, always have, and he's for real in my opinion, and I applaud him for putting his money where his mouth is, or at least putting his music where his mouth is, mm-hmm. and saying, look, I'm not going to support this if you guys are going to put him on there. But, the marketplace of ideas, in a way, it's also good to know what people are thinking, right? And not necessarily have everything in the shadows. But there's a limit to that, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, no, we are, because, I think about this idea of whiteness propagating this notion of ideas, how things are protected under the guise of whiteness, and what does that mean in many ways too. Did you see the Brian Flores situation?
Now that I don't know what you're talking about. No.
Okay, so let me share. So Brian Flores was a black, African American NFL football coach, and he was fired. He was let go. It shocked a lot of folks. I was stunned. Mm-hmm. I can't remember.
What team?
Miami Dolphins.
Okay.
Yep. The coach in his second year really set up to fail, because the Houston Texans, another NFL football team, are really a poor organization. Black man. He was let go. There are 32 NFL football teams. And out of those 32 NFL football teams, there's only one black coach. Over 70% of the league now is made up of black folks. And so Brian Flores essentially came out and said, hey, I'm going to sue the NFL, and I'm suing these teams because there's a sense of racial discrimination. And he talked about this idea that the NFL is kind of like a master system. Yes, I'm master. That kind of thing, where essentially what you have here is you have a bunch of owners who are running plantations. And with all of those owners who are running plantations, you got all the black slave workers who are working this and being mistreated in different ways. So, I'm getting off topic, but my point here is that in the NFL, they have this thing called the Rooney Rule. And in the Rooney Rule essentially says that all teams have to interview at least one person of color for a head coaching job. It's really become somewhat of a tokenized thing where teams have done this to say, look at us. We interviewed the candidate.
Right, we fulfilled the requirement.
Absolutely. We can check that box, but we're really interested in someone else. So people love Bill Belichick. I'm not a Bill Belichick. I don't even care for New England Patriots and all this stuff. People are kind of obsessed with that type of stuff. And so, I'm sorry about this, folks. Michelle Obama's texting me and everything. I'll call that sister back a little bit later. And she's probably upset with Barack. And, I've been telling her to leave Barack for me for a long time, and she hadn't paid any attention to it. Oh, I've said it on here before. I love me some Michelle Obama. Barack's okay, but, well, I'll take Michelle any day. So back to what we're saying.
Yeah.
NFL teams have to interview someone. So here's where Bill Belichick comes into place. The New York Giants football team, they are going to interview Brian Flores, this Rooney Rule. Brian Flores is thinking about getting ready to interview for this job and everything. Well, he gets a bunch of text messages from Bill Belichick, right? Brian Flores, African-American guy, Bill Belichick, New England white guy, right? And Bill Belichick is saying, great job, I'm excited that you got the job and all of this stuff. Brian Flores was confused. See, Bill Belichick was texting the wrong person.
Oh.
That was going on. Oh. And so essentially what happened is Brian Flores thought, okay, I see what's going on. They had already made a decision on who they were going to hire, offered this person a job.
But we're just going through the motion. Yeah.
Because he was supposed to interview 3 days later.
Yeah.
This tokenization, this exploitive nature of black folks and race and everything too. White folks, the owners, no black folks own teams, no black coaches that are there and everything too. And I say all that to say, when I think about folks like Joe Rogan, for example, right? Mm-hmm. This notion of white privilege. He gets to say and do these things from the lens of whiteness. We talk about, these NFL players, and we can go on and on and on about this. The other example I wanted to bring up tonight too, as we think about this, is I was having a conversation with someone who was upset about Aunt Your Mama pancakes, remember? And they changed the name and was talking about this idea that we make too big of a deal out of it. It's just pancakes, folks.
Right.
What does it matter? We're just eating pancakes, regardless of what's on a box and what it entails. So you hear all this stuff.
Or like sports teams that have names that are just disrespectful of whole communities.
Hey, don't get me started. Yeah. I'm glad the Cleveland Indians have changed. I think they're changing their name and changed their
Guardians.
Logo. The Guardians is what they're okay.
I saw today that Washington is now going to be the Commanders.
The Commanders, right? The Washington football team. Yeah. Interesting, because I've been boycotting the Washington when they were once known as the Redskins for a long time.
Yeah.
Because I sat there and I thought, how would I feel if someone named themselves the Washington Blackfaces, right? White people naming a football team the Blackfaces, some white guy painting his or her or their face black and, going around with fried chicken in one hand and watermelon in the other hand and everything. And so there's this presumptuous element under whiteness and white privilege that we make too big of a deal out of things and we become too culturally sensitive.
Well, I think it's easy. It's easy from the perspective of somebody who's not daily, dealing with either overt or covert racism, to say it's not a big deal, right? I mean, it's easy to say, okay, well, it's a sports team. It's been named that way for 50 or however many years. Why are we making a big deal out of it? Well, because people are finally having enough courage to speak up about these things and say, you know what, it's just not right, And so I think it's easier for people who are not the recipients of the poor treatment or the racial slurs or racism in general. It's easier for them to say, well, it's so politically correct, it's no big deal, when really I think, and I think also it's easier in the abstract to say that things are no big deal, right? But then when you know somebody, right, who is maybe the victim of racism or poor language choices or something like that, it's a little bit different because you know somebody, if you know how it affects them, right? If you know how they feel when they hear that sports team's name, or how they feel when they hear a certain word or see a certain advertisement that has, racially charged imagery. It's a little different. It's a little different when you know somebody who is struggling with that.
You're someone who is a white ally, a white co-conspirator. You're someone who thinks passionately and conscientious about the plight of other people quite a bit. I got a tough question for you.
Yeah.
Do you recall the first time, or me back up before I get to this question. Mm-hmm. When did you become aware that you were white?
Huh.
Really fully understood whiteness.
I don't know that I am fully aware of that. I guess I'm fully aware that I'm not white, right? But, whiteness is it's not something you grow up learning about what whiteness is, because it's in our society, at least back when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't an other, right? It was the norm. White people were the norm and everyone else was the other. So you learned about other people. You learned about Black people and Native Americans and Asian people and stuff like that, but you never really learned about whiteness. So I don't know, I don't know that there was an aha moment for me that was like, oh yeah, I'm white.
Right.
So I guess I can't say. I'm pulling the mic closer. I don't know if that's any better. Is that better? Sorry, I just realized it was really far away. So I don't know that I ever, those are things that I'm sort of digging into now.
So say a little bit more about digging into it now. Because the idea, of course, is whiteness is normality. Whiteness is average. Whiteness is ideal.
The default.
It is the default. I was telling some folks this weekend that is a scholar who thinks about race and religion. I always think about thinking about the Sistine Chapel. And when I visited the Sistine Chapel and I saw the creation of Adam, right, this constructed back in the 16th century, right, this notion of this art as whiteness is beautiful. Not only did, let's talk about the sexism, not only that God created man first.
Right.
God created man in the image of themselves as whiteness.
Right.
And so everything operates that way. And so you stated that you're not sure, and you're still trying to figure this out. When did you become aware that there was oppression, there was racism, all of those things, you thought, wow, this is real?
Early. I was thinking about that today, knowing that I was coming in here. And
I'm glad you're thinking. You're reading my mind a little bit.
Yeah. Let's put it this way. I like to think that I was sensitive to that at a very early age. I can say, by the time I was 16, I was definitely, I've always been very liberal-minded, like I was saying before, free speech, and that's always been my bent. But I think from a very early age, probably middle school, because let's not forget, I grew up in a very predominantly white area. So there were very few Black kids in any of the schools that I went to.
Did you go to school with any?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I look back on it. I look back on that now, and boy, I wasn't close friends with any Black people. I certainly knew Black people. I played football freshman year, and there were Black people on the team with me. And, but I wonder why, I didn't have, or I wasn't friends with any of the Black kids.
But let's think about that. But why do you think you were not?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer other than I'm trying to think of. I think there was a black family that lived on our street at the very other end of the street. I don't think we were the same age. Mm-hmm. I think the kids might have been older. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know.
But that's okay. I mean, that's part of the point, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and one of the things, I'm getting at here is that while I don't know if I can remember when I first realized that I was black, I remember a series of things, that
mm-hmm.
defined it. The story that I oftentimes tell folks, and I have a picture of this, is when when my brother and I had to go see Santa, really mm-hmm. young, and we went to see Santa, and the way white supremacy operates, and it conditions even people of color in so many ways, that we went to see Santa, and Santa was black. And I remember being upset, right? Being around black folks, black mm-hmm. community, black neighborhoods, and upset that Santa was black. And I remember thinking, Santa's not going to know what to bring me for Christmas because that's not the real Santa, because Santa can't be black.
Wow.
Right, and really crying and being upset about that.
You internalized all the imagery that you saw of Santa Claus for all the years, always being white, and
but that's true.
Up.
But that's true for everything, though, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, everything's ideal. Right? We think about this notion of white privilege, and again, just to define for folks, when I talk about white privilege, I'm not talking about economic wealth or anything like that. There are definitely disparities that exist in that way. But I'm talking about the fact that, there are advantages of whiteness within society, and people will push back on that. And those advantages, of course, is the fact that you don't have to think about being white.
Right.
When you go in for that job, you don't have to worry about, well, is my hair a little too funky? Or I want to use a particular vernacular that may not be white mm-hmm. enough, so I may have to code switch. Hi, Ritch. We should play golf at the country club this week. Maybe we will bring our wives or our partners. That whole idea mm-hmm. of that whole syntax and everything there. So that's my point. Just don't have to think about it. Why didn't you have black friends? Why didn't you hang out with folks, right? As progressive as mm-hmm. you are. Mm-hmm. Because that's not your problem.
Right. And that's what I'm, and like I said, I think I've always been, and this is what I've been thinking a lot about. And I think is the difference between, sort of the way it was and the way it is now, right? Where thought it was enough to just not be racist. Right. Thought it was enough to, have an open mind and love all people equally, but
that's not enough.
That's not enough. It's not enough because I find myself now in a mostly white town.
Oh yes, super white town.
Super white town. Wishing that there were more diversity in our town. And I, again, very few people of color as friends. Why? Why is that? Why do I live here?
It's a great question. And Newburyport is a great community.
It is. It's a great community.
If I could afford to move here, I would move here. I say that, but going through this winter, I'm not sure I can stay in New England much longer. I'm losing my mind. But think about it this way, right? And if we were to talk about your hood, if we were to talk about Newburyport in your neighborhood, do you think that's just a preferred methodology? And when I say that, I mean that when you're white, you don't have to think about the whiteness. Yeah. Industries, banks, all of those things, they don't have to think about the fact that we've created such an insular community. It's like a Hallmark movie. You ever watch any of those shows on Hallmark?
No.
You're an intellectual, right? I like to think that I'm an intellectual.
Yeah, I'm not watching Hallmark.
Oh,
movies.
and I've watched Hallmark, and look what I've seen shows on Hallmark, and when I watch Hallmark, I'm the one who's sitting there counting, looking for the black folks, right, and looking for that ideal. But do you think people just prefer it this way? It's safe, it's comfortable, it's ideal. You know, they're unaware of their behavior in creating this fabric of this insular white institution that privileges and benefits the vast majority of folks here.
So you're asking me if I think people just prefer it that way?
Yes.
I'm sure there are people who do.
But the absence of thinking about it.
I see
also,
what you're saying.
But
yeah,
no, but I agree. I was saying what you're saying.
Oh, no, I got you, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think they prefer just nothing? Yes, of course. Of course. I mean, not even just talking about race, but I think most people prefer not to examine their life and just sort of go through the motions of the day and not to think, not really think too deeply about stuff. But, I think that, I can speak for me, and I can say that what I'm doing now is thinking more deeply about things and realizing that it's not enough to just not be racist.
Yes.
I would like to, and I'm getting involved in ways that I hadn't, and because I'd like to see change. I'd like to see, a broader spectrum of society represented in our town, on the North Shore in general. And I think that we'd all be richer for it.
No, and I agree.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you're doing in terms of educating yourself, getting engaged, really thinking about your whiteness as an identity, because whiteness is an identity, but also about others?
So, of course, I've been reading a lot.
Yes.
So that's one thing I've been doing and learning a lot. I've been watching, like last night, I just started watching the master class on for that is now is free right now for the month of February for Black History Month.
When I got that, I was surprised.
Yeah.
I was like, that's awesome.
And I'll tell you what, it's not short. There's a lot of content there. I watched it probably for easily an hour last night, and I don't even think I got halfway through the first part. So I think you're probably looking at, 4+ hours of content. So I'm doing that. I as you know, I joined the Governor's Academy, which is where my kids go to school. Well, my one kid now goes to school. I joined the Family Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, and that's been eye-opening. So I'm just trying to put myself out there, get out of my comfort zone, get out of just sort of sleepwalking through things and just accepting things the way that they are, learning about people's struggle.
Yes.
And just wanting to be better, wanting to change the sort of complacent path that I've been on. Again, not overtly racist and not, wanting to exclude anybody, but also not really going out of my way to really try to make things better.
What do you recall? And again, this is a tough question, so I always got to ask these unfair questions because I do that sometimes. One of the things that I always challenge white folks is to think about a racist thought that they once had, or something that percolated in their mind even for a second. You ever have any of those growing up?
No.
Do you remember any? You don't have to be specific or anything about that, but share what you want to share, where something just kind of crept in your mind, even if it was you didn't act on it, but it was a thought, and you were just like, wow.
I think probably, thinking that, most Black people are poor. Most Black people are, I won't say uneducated, but not as educated as much as white people.
Yes.
So those are some things, and I was having this conversation, recently. I think it's, I'll speak for me. Growing up white in America, I think it's how do I deny that I've inherited or internalized some racist ideas? And I'm not going to sit here today and tell you that those are all out of my head. I'm not there yet. And again, I'm not saying that I'm, but there's ideas that you have to check yourself and you say, well, why are you thinking that?
But that doesn't just belong to white folks. I mean, there are black folks.
That's right.
Who hold those ideas,
about themselves. Oh, yeah.
Let's start with Clarence Thomas and how he feels about black people, right? I mean, he's essentially called us lazy. Right? We can't get out of our own way. We don't try. We don't work hard enough. Thomas Sowell is another thinker who really operates in that notion too. Bill Cosby, I hate saying his name out loud because he's just a problematic human being in general, and some of the things that he said. It's just interesting, going back to that term of internalizing these attitudes, and not just white folks, but black folks internalize it too. I know folks, I'm thinking about my hometown where I grew up, talking about the problem of violence there, and that we don't need a Klan, we're just killing each other. And I always have to stop folks and say, whoa, wait, just for a second there. Think about what you're saying and what's wrong with what you're saying. And this is coming out of the mouth of black people.
That's right. And, that's an example of something I've thought too, because it was a very big topic, 2 years ago, in the summer of 2020, right?
George Floyd.
After George Floyd.
Yes.
And it was, look at all these black people out on the street, destroying property.
Yes.
And you find yourself thinking that way. It's like, okay, well, why are they doing that? And on the one hand, in the abstract, it's like, well, that doesn't make sense that they would be doing that. But on the other side, there's so much that you can't separate from that. Oh boy, that groundswell of just frustration and anger and turmoil that communities are in, when you just feel like you've got no chance, right? And what do? And you see it, I think, in oppressed communities all over the world, where you're up against a wall and you've got nowhere to go. What do you expect at in a certain point from people to react?
Well, I mean, even for me, I think about, just some of the issues over the decades in Chicago. And I've always been one who believes that Chicago needs one big riot, just burn the whole place down. And folks are like, oh my goodness, did Eddie just say he wants to promote violence? But I think back to the 1992 LA riots, all the problems that were happening in LA. Then after the riots in LA, we found out, there's a lot of systemic issues that's driving these problems. We saw that with the O.J. Simpson issue, right? Yeah. We saw that in 2015 with Baltimore. And the Department of Justice went into Baltimore, and they were stunned at the health inequities, the employment inequities, the educational inequities. Folks talk about, when the economy was just super booming, look how great it's doing, but yet they continue to miss the point that there are a large number of unemployed black people because of the way structural racism works. And people deny that, right? They want to operate from this colorblind position that there's no such thing as structural racism.
Or they want to say, well, that was so long ago. Can't we get over it already?
My favorite thing, of course, is people who misuse King's quote from his "I Have a Dream" speech about it should be about the content of someone's character and not the color of their skin. Right. And the thing they miss, of course, is he's talking about that, and yet not long after he gave that speech, he gave it in August of '63. In September, I want to say it was September the 14th or 15th of 1963, the 16th Street Birmingham Baptist Church. And King talked about the fact that he had to go to the funerals of 4 black girls who had been bombed by white supremacists. and would never be remembered by the content of their characters, but they're going to be martyred because they were black and executed. It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy. How about being Jewish growing up? What was that like for you?
I think that was another thing where early on I realized that I was not a fan of religion. And I felt like it, it just seemed to me, and in a lot of ways still does, that it does more to separate people than it does to bring them together. And, how is it that because I was born where I was born, I think my God is the best God, but you were born where you were born, you think your God is the best God, and your God is right. And so, I'm not a religious person. I was bar mitzvahed. I did go to Hebrew school.
So what about 13? 12?
I was bar mitzvahed at 13.
13.
Yeah, I did go to Hebrew school. But pretty much my Jewish career ended, at 13.
Did you experience any anti-Semitism?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. A little bit in my town, for sure. There were some kids who, you would every now and then there would be some, slur written in the bathroom, or you'd overhear something or something like that.
But within in the last couple of years, we've even had some incidents in Newburyport.
Oh yeah,
where there have been some anti-Semitic slurs and things written in different places right here.
Well, it's on the rise.
It's been on the rise, yeah. We don't have time to go into why it's on the rise,
right?
But I think we know.
We know why.
We know why it's on the rise. When people give white supremacists and anti-Semitic folks permission to be who they are, they're going to say, why am I pretending I'm not this way? I'm just going to do it.
Right. But what was your question? You were asking me about growing up Jewish.
Yes.
I get, and very early on, I saw, I would see some anti-black racism in the Jewish community, and I would wonder to myself, well, how is that possible? How can a people who, from what I'm learning in Hebrew school, who have been, so oppressed over however many hundreds and thousands of years, how can you not see that it's the same thing, And that was disheartening to see that.
It's interesting. Again, there's no way we can delve into this too much because there's just so much here. But that whole Jewish black historical tension, right? Which is strange too, because particularly when you think about, I saw this, and it may have been from the Anti-Defamation League. I get a lot of their stuff in my inbox, and kind of reading a lot of the work that's going on there. That 70% of American Jewish people actually support things like Black Lives Matter, right? There's this sense of tension, but some of it it's kind of mythical, and it's been
manufactured.
Manufactured. I like that word, in the way white supremacy kind of plays on this in many ways.
Yep. I mean, it would seem to me that the two communities have more in common than they don't have in common, and that they would be more aligned and allied to each other. They're sort of joined in the same struggle.
I always think about the fact that I think about the river, and I think about the fact that Moses led the Jews out of Egypt into the Promised Land, right? And they settled across the Red River, and they called home Israel. Much to the same way Harriet Tubman, right, guided black folks out of the American South to the North, following the North Star, thinking about Frederick Douglass in that way, and really trying to find some semblance of home that's there too. Right. I mean, and the comparison's just unbelievable. In the time we have left, I want to ask you, tell me about a little bit about, when you were growing up, and we talked about, being in school and everything. was race, and think about white privilege, was race and racial differences talked about at the dinner table? Were those conversations happening in your white spaces?
A little bit, not a lot.
I mean, because we're about the same age, and we are, we're products of, really moving out of the 60s, right? Growing up in the 70s and the 80s, and, segregation existed, but yet not to the same extent that it did in the 60s. So conversations were happening, but different.
Yeah, I can't remember a whole lot.
Yeah.
Honestly. I can't remember a whole lot, and I don't know why that is. But I can't remember a whole lot of discussion about race. In my house.
But it's interesting because even in my house, while the conversation came up in different ways, it wasn't like my household now, where it's like the daily menu of conversations on the topic where we talk about this stuff quite a bit. And mainly because, my parents, had multiple jobs, are hardworking folks. We came home and, I love my mama to death, and, sad when she was at work. But one of the things I was always excited about is that when she couldn't be there, she would go pick up Chinese food and leave it on the refrigerator with a note saying, heat it up. And I always loved that really bad Chinese food, that fried Chinese food and everything too. So we didn't really delve into that a whole lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe we did as I started to get older, in high school, and was more vocal about my opinions on race and racism and religion and that kind of thing. So I think it was, maybe later. But not early on, no. Definitely not when I was a little kid.
You're reading Cornel West's book, Race Matters, right now.
I am.
And of course, and I
got it right here.
You got it. Oh, I like it. May I see?
Yeah, of course.
Grab that, hold that up for the camera and everything too. And you're into it. You're the crisis of Black leadership. That's an excellent chapter. I have read this book one too many times. The first time I read it, I don't know, it was probably it was around the time it was published, right? 10th grade year. And I remember reading it. And it was the first book that was just eye-opening to me because I never thought about this stuff, right? They weren't talking about this stuff in school. And I remember back then, I was like, I don't even know I can't even contextualize this, right? And then start thinking about it, and over the years, you start to understand a little bit more. What's been your takeaway from that work so far?
Boy, I'm noting a lot of things in here, and there was, it's kind of eye-opening, really. He's talking about so many things. This idea of market morality, which is, I was having trouble understanding what that was, and then he talks about it more. I'm just sort of going through some of these things. The nihilistic threat to Black America,
yes.
And that to me is really powerful because it just sort of speaks to and this was, written back in the
92,
93, right after
it came after the LA riots.
After the LA riots,
yes.
Right. And, just to understand how there's a certain segment of our population who, the way he's describing it, who just have so little hope, and it's really sad.
It's interesting because, as you know, hopefully he'll be on the campus of the Governor's Academy in April.
I hope so. That'd be great.
I know. Yeah, working on that right now, trying to make that happen. And I'm confident that that's going to work out and everything.
Great.
And so I remember probably about, when one of my book publishers kind of put me in contact with the folks when I started to think about bringing him to campus, I reread that book. probably for the 15th millionth time, but hadn't read it in a while. And you know what was striking to me, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. This is something that was published in 1993, and how relevant it is in the 21st century. Did you get that takeaway looking at it, or does it feel dated to you?
No, I do, and I also, I think the same thing about, obviously I wasn't alive during the civil rights movement. I was born just after, but we're not done. Yeah. We're not done, and there's a. In my opinion, I feel like there is, I know people want to say past is past and, it's time we got on with, but there's also this idea that how do you fully move on from something if you've never really fully dealt with it? And I just feel.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. I just feel like I felt very viscerally, 2 years ago when George Floyd was murdered and everything started to sort of come apart. I felt very viscerally that, there is a reckoning with our past that still hasn't happened, and I get why there's a reticence to do it, but let's just do it, and let's it's going to be painful, but let's just do it. Let's finally reckon with it and make whatever peace with it we can, and I don't know. There's just people who don't want to reckon with it.
And so that's my point. How do we do that? Folks were upset, right? Particularly with George Floyd, and we witnessed that. But we've witnessed so many other things, right? Yeah. And then shortly after being shocked by what happened to George Floyd, it's interesting how people just moved on. Mm-hmm. Like kind of like news cycles, where people are upset because now we're wanting to have conversations about structural and systemic racism and the dynamic of institutions and how they perpetuate notions of white supremacy and how they essentially they've created this inebriated spirit in a way that's daunting, and we can't wrestle with that because we move forward, right? It's always like, what is it? One step.
Two steps forward,
one step backwards, right?
I always get that.
I always got to think about the two. I always like the way Malcolm put it in the chapter in Race Matters about Malcolm X. I like that one a lot.
Looking forward to it.
Malcolm said, how do we think and talk about issues of race? How do we talk about that as progress? If you take a dagger, a knife, and you stab a man in the back or stab a person in the back, right? You've probably heard this before.
Yeah, he's got it right there.
Is it in there? I can't even remember.
It is. It's.
We'll read it. What does it say?
I'll read it right now. Hold on. It's the chapter called "The Crisis of Black Leadership," and the quote from Malcolm X is, "You don't stick a knife in a man's back 9 inches." And then pull it out 6 and say you're making progress. Yeah. I mean, I love that statement. Yeah. And I think that really kind of defines elements that's there. Brothers, as we kind of wrap this up and everything, I want to give you the final word here. We think about race. We think about the challenges. We think about what's going on in society. We think about the problems of capitalism, the problems of politics. I'm not going to name any particular Republican parties or no parties or anything like that. Was a slip. That just came out of my mouth. I didn't mean to say that. I would never say anything evil about the Republican Party. What's on your mind? What are your concerns? What are your hopes, fears, or anything? I just want to give you the last sound bite here. I'm concerned. I'm a little worried about where we are right now. I think, certainly in my lifetime, I've never seen us this divided.
It's real. It's scary.
It is, and it's sad. It's really sad, and I honestly don't know how we fix it. I don't know how we heal that. I guess, again, probably in the 70s, late 60s and 70s through the Vietnam War, we were probably very divided then. And people probably thought the same thing, how do we get through this? How do we get to the other side of this? And we did, but did we really? I don't know if these things are just destined to happen every 20, 30 years, but I just really feel like it's different right now. And I guess I'm just looking for understanding. I'm searching for meaning. I'm searching for, a better way, a more inclusive and diverse way of life. And I'm just one person trying to, do what I think is right. But yeah, I'm worried. I'm worried. I don't know. There's so many things. Elections and I'm concerned. I don't mean to totally be so negative, but I'm worried. I'm concerned.
But it's real, and I don't know if I shared this with you or not. I'm not an optimistic person at all. I mean, I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic. Where are you?
I think I would probably describe myself the same way. I hope that we can pull it together, but it doesn't look like it. We're just everybody's talking past each other. Nobody's talking to each other. And that's why, I like this conversation, just because we're just talking.
That's it.
And I'm saying to you, I certainly don't have all the answers, and I'm not a model of the anti-racist white person. And, I've got things I need to deal with and set right, in my head. But I'm making an effort. That's all I can do, really, make an earnest effort to be different. But yeah, I don't know how we get past where we are right now. I wish I did.
Man, brother, we're going to keep talking about this, and maybe we'll figure out a way in terms of how we navigate this. It's always good to have awesome white brothers like yourself to talk to, because, I love white folks, particularly white allies, white people who will show up and engage, and folks who, I can depend on as a person of color, as a black man in this country too.
Yep.
And so, folks, thank you for listening and everything. Remember, this is February. It's Black History Month. Go out and support some black businesses. If you don't know who or where those black businesses are, give me an email. Fire me an email at racematterspodcast@gmail.com. And also, if there's something about black culture, black identity, the spirit of black folks, and all the things we've contributed to that really gets you excited, email me. And again, I'll share that here on the air and everything too. We talk about these dark elements about race and the plight and the conditions of black folks all the time. But as I've said before, we have a good time too. We don't go home and we don't sit around and talk about how grim and dim the world is and how awful, the conditions are, and they're not always super great. Like I said, I'm not optimistic, but we celebrate. So thank you for tuning in to Race Matters. Ritch, brother, as always, it's good to have you here on the air and everything.
Thanks, Eddie. Appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, we're going to do it again.
Yeah, let's do it.
So much to talk about.
Oh, yeah, anytime.